Now, today I have three people who are immigrant professionals, but who are global authorities in their field. When I say global authority, they are not just known in Ottawa, they are known globally. That makes them global figures. And they are immigrant professionals just like myself. How did they break through the noise? Now, I was speaking to someone yesterday and he said, Charles, you came here when Canada was still good. So you can actually break even and get a job and blah, blah, blah. And what I said to him, I love excuses. Because if you're a student of life, you find that the reality of life is that the more things change, the more they remain the same. Things never actually change. Because when things change, society, you adjust, your family, everything adjusts to the things that change, and eventually that becomes the norm. In project management, we call that business as usual. So things would always be business as usual. I want to bust the myth that Canada is not as easy or more difficult than it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. I will tell you how many applications I made that none of them were responded to. 5 years ago that they said Canada was easy. Jermaine will tell you the same 10 years or 15 years ago when they said Canada was easy, or 3 years ago. And you will find that the story is the same 5, 10, 15 years ago for immigrant professionals. Now, because the story is the same, the strategy will not change. The strategy may evolve, but the core, the strategy remains the same. Ladies and gentlemen, it's 12:05. I promised to get the panelists the mic at 12:05. I have with us Taiwo Abraham, an international speaker, a product of community building, an advocate of good governance, sustainability, mentorship, servant leadership, a global authority, Project Management Institute's own son, twice honorary of Project Management Institute, a man I respect, a man I love, a man I admire. Taiwo, thank you for being here, sir.
Like, oh, gosh. Thank you, Charles. It's always a pleasure.
And I've got Jermaine. Jermaine is an ally. Before it feels like, before I knock, he's responding, regardless of what he has on his table. Now, to prove to you, Jermaine has his baby cuddled on his arms for this call. He could have said, no, Charles, I gotta go do parent duty. Jermaine is a professor. He teaches at the School of Business at Carleton. Jermaine works Sprout, right?
University of Ottawa.
EFO. Yeah, well,
Same, but different. But same.
Yeah, but I shouldn't make that mistake. I apologize. Jermaine is also, I call it a principal figure with the government, because he walks the corridors where policies are made. He happens to shake hands and see them face to face. So maybe if you're in Jermaine's good book, Jermaine will give them the eye. And suddenly all the taxes would drop. Jermaine, it's always a pleasure having you here.
Thank you, Charles.
And
Happy
then
to
I
be here.
have, well, thank you, brother. And then I have Thomas Doyle III. For the last 4 years, he's been a brother, a friend, a partner in crime. I call him the daddy of PMI Ottawa Valley chapter, and I like to call myself the mommy, because when Thomas beats them, they run to me. When I beat them, they run to Thomas, and it seems to work well. Sometimes it doesn't. But Thomas is a digital transformation specialist. The talent that Thomas has, it busts my brain sometimes. Let me speak in my native language. And the fact that he's always willing to jump in and help in marketing, in sponsorship, Thomas, it's a pleasure to have you here, even though I know you're seated in the trunk of your car taking this call.
Thank you, Charles. Pleasure to be here.
Okay. Now, for the next 10 minutes, we're going to do this. We're gonna start with. Are we starting with Thomas, Jermaine, or Taiwo? I'm just gonna go as the spirit leads. We're gonna wait one of the panelists and hear their story. Because of time, I'm just gonna give them 10 minutes. Now, this would be more about you. If you have questions, things that challenge you, practical things that you want to hear about, put it in the chat. Let's start taking those questions while the panelists tell us how they got where they got to, regardless of the challenges against them, due to the color of their skin, due to their intelligence, due to their blushing handsomeness. It could be any of those things. I'm going to start with Jermaine. Jermaine.
That's my green light, my go.
That's your green light, baby. That's your green light.
So thanks for having me, Charles. And thanks everyone for being here. So as Charles mentioned, like I'm currently a government executive. I'm a part-time prof at Telfair School of Management, University of Ottawa. I'm also a career transition coach. I've been helping people figure out their why for many, many years. For the simple reason that when I came to Canada 20 years ago, I was in, like most newcomer, I had nothing. I had $5,000 in my bank account. I didn't have a job. I didn't have a network. I didn't have a local experience. I didn't have credibility. I didn't have visibility. I had nothing, basically, like anyone else. And people started giving me things: time, old furniture, job opportunities, any of that. And I started paving my own path with that. So this generosity that I had when I first moved to Canada is what basically formed me and convinced me that that's my way. I need to give back and I need to always give back. So if I go back 20 years ago, I didn't have the money, I didn't have the contacts, didn't have the experience, didn't have credibility, visibility, any of that. But what I had was time, energy, desire to contribute, and desire to integrate in this new country that opened its doors for me. My background is from Lebanese descent. And when I came here, that was in 2005. A year after that, there was a war in Lebanon in 2006, and we had an influx of Lebanese immigrants coming to Canada, specifically to Montreal, to university. I was a university student doing my master's, and I figured, how can I help all of these people integrate in the same way that I was helped in this past year that I was here? They're coming in the same situation, except that they have the emotional challenge of war, which I didn't have when I immigrated a year before them. So they don't have the mental luxury or emotional luxury to figure their thing out. So I have to help them. So I joined the University Association, Lebanese University Association in Montreal. And I joined as the VP of Academics. Not a high visible position. I'm not the president. I'm not anything. That's the VP of Academics. Why? Because I wanted to establish a few things that will help students. So I helped establish a card that gave them discounts whenever they went to stores and bought stuff, food, whatever. I established a scholarship program, gave them money to help them pay their university tuition fees. I established a old test program. So if you're taking a course, you can refer to this database and get an old test, sample test, and figure out how to better pass your course. So basically, a few things that I did that put me on the map. It put me on the map in front of other students. It put me on the map for the university, and it put me on the map for all the business and other stakeholders that we were dealing with. For example, for the scholarship fund, it is still running up until today. We're talking almost 20 years later. That fund is still running. People know that I'm the one who created that fund. And back then, I thought I was simply giving back. But with time and maturity and experience, what I realized that I wasn't just giving back. I was also gaining. I was gaining leadership experience. I was gaining, as Ngozi is mentioning, how to come up with solutions. Like I figured a solution to a problem. I learned how to fundraise. I learned how to build partnership. I learned how to do governance, how to manage, how to tell stories that inspire donors. I learned a lot of these skills that became the foundation of who I am today. I'm a storyteller today. Charles knows I do presentation skills for a living. That's my part-time job in university. And I couldn't have done that had I not gone through that previous volunteering experience. So it showed me that volunteering, when it's done strategically, it is not just a community service, a giving hours, giving time back. It's also career building, it's career defining. It's basically a mini lab to develop leadership, to bridge new network, to test things. And I have to put my career transition coach hat here. It allows
Jermaine,
to transition.
I would pause you. I call it the perfect sandbox
100%.
where you can create, erase without judgment, even though you could get criticized, but you're not being paid for it, so no one is going to throw the daggers at you, and you make the mistakes in a safe place that you wouldn't make at work. Right?
Exactly.
So, I'll let you continue. I'll give you 2 more minutes, then I'll throw this to Taiwo.
So it helped me to learn a lot about different careers, about different things I wanted to do. Do I want to be a leader? I want to be a governance expert? Do I want to be a business development person with all the fundraising efforts that I was doing? So it helped me understand different career paths and see what I wanted to do. So again, today, we're not night yet. It feels like night with a small one in my arms. But today, I want to share those experiences to rethink volunteering. It is not just giving time. It's not just something extra. It's something that can be considered to some extent as essential. It's specific choices that we can make in volunteering to make it strategic so that it directly shapes all the future opportunities that we are unlocking in our career. So I'll stop here.
Yes. Out of everything you said, regardless of what you did, one thing that was recurring was the heart behind each of every of those initiatives. It was primarily, what is the problem? And what can I do to make their life just a tiny little bit easier? And in doing that, the direct output for that was visibility, right? And my mantra these days is, I don't know where I got that from, is visibility is the currency you need to accelerate your career, not your skills, not your talents. Now, out of everything Jermaine said, Jermaine didn't volunteer with the Project Management Institute. Because I know lots of folks, do we have volunteering opportunities? PMI. Out of everything he said, there was no mention of the Project Management Institute. Because lots of folks say, I want to give back, but I don't know what to do. Jermaine did not ask the question, where is the PMI to volunteer with? Till date, he's not volunteer with us. But to date, he's still making tremendous impact in the society. Now, let's take someone who breathes PMI presently. But before he got to become PMI's live wire, how did he get there? What got him to the limelight of the global stage? It wasn't a walk in the park. For anyone that is in the space to become a 2-time PMI awardee, I've been trying for years. I've never been shortlisted, so I know it's hard. Next is Uncle Taiwo. I call him Uncle T. Within our circle, we call him King Taiwo because he is royalty. King Taiwo, tell us how you got from the slum of Ajegunle or the palaces of Ikoyi to working at PMI's global headquarters.
Thank you, Charles. So first of all, because of your gray beards and gray hair, I would like to clear the air that a title, not an entitlement for me. Like, I should call you Daddy.
Stop it.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you. Very important topic and one that is very close to my heart. For me, where I come from, volunteering is almost next to nature. Like, it's second nature for us. Like, we believe in community kind of living where everyone depends on everyone to get by. But I will spare you the story of how in my secondary school, I volunteered to train the teachers in my school on how to help the principal prevent truancy of students. It was a menace when I was in my middle high school. And the principal of the school was obviously frustrated about it, but the teachers were not helping. And I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought it was no brainer. So I designed what I call a strategy at the time. And I went to the principal's office and gave it to him. And the next thing, the principal sent for me. And I got to this room full of teachers. And the principal was right in the middle and said, yeah, that's the boy. Come over. Now present the strategy that you have beautifully written to these people. For context, Nigeria is a power distance culture where you you don't just stand in front of your teachers and tell them what to do. But for me, that's how second nature it was for me, and probably faith-based background, volunteering in church, singing in the choir and all that stuff. So it's always there. How did I get to be so involved with project management right now? My background, my bachelor's was in botany, so I really had nothing to do with project management. But as soon as I graduated, I was in the Red Cross back in Nigeria. At some point, I was a state youth coordinator. It was a thankless job. We went to high schools to teach high schoolers or to kind of mentor them and show them why education is important, and use all the opportunities in the Red Cross to get them going. But little did I know that I was creating a foundation for what the future holds. A few years down the line, life was rough. I needed to find something else to do. And I found myself taking the PMP certification. But I needed experience to qualify for the exam. Guess what? All the projects I had done as a state youth coordinator became those experiences I could tender for the application. Got PMP, the rest is history. Now, it didn't end there. A few years later, I was working a job that was very stressful. But in the middle of that job, my manager suggested that I take a management graduate program so that I can have a voice in the organization. I was working at a bank at the time on a project, but this guy has botany as his bachelor's, and yeah, he's talking to managers. So my manager said, if you can combine school with work, I will allow you work remotely for 1 week and be on site 1 week. This involves traveling a long distance. I'll keep it at that, every other week. Now, in the middle of that, I signed up for a class at Harvard. Again, still learning about strategy and all that. So at this point, you would think that, oh, my hands were full enough. In the middle of that, there was a program called PROMACON, Project Management Conference of Nigeria. At the time, it was the biggest gathering of project professionals in West Africa. They were bringing it to my city. They needed volunteers, and I had a work relationship with the lead organizer. So I told him, I said, hey, can I volunteer for this? He looked at me and said, Taiwo, something is wrong with you. You are in school, you're taking two crazy programs at the same time work, and you still want to volunteer. I said, well, one way or the other, I got to volunteer for this. Like, this is my community. So right there, I volunteered. I met this man called Taufik Babayeju. It was the first time we had any in-person interaction. I was just there volunteering. I traveled just for the purpose of that. I wasn't paid. If I tell you my salary at the time, you would question the madness behind all this. But in the end, I met him, no strings attached. We moved on. 2 years later, I moved city to the capital, federal capital city in Nigeria. And then I was new in the city. Interestingly, there was Taufik Babayeju conquering the city already. So I reached out to him. I said, hey, I'm new here. And then he was like, hey, I've been looking for a trainer. Can you help us with training? That was not volunteering anymore. That was a paid gig.
Yep. Okay.
I took a few training. Then the next thing, the consulting firm that Babayeju leads, iCentra, was listed to lead the development of the enterprise program management office at the central bank in Nigeria. That's equivalent of Bank of Canada or Federal Reserve Bank in the US. Like, this is the kind of project that you're looking for the best PMs country to lead. And I was right there, living on the foundation that was laid in a volunteer kind of relationship. And he looked at me and he said, Taiwo, we're going to interview a lot of people for this job, but this job is yours to lose. That gave me the confidence to approach the interview with all the finesse that I needed to get the job. I got the job. It was a successful project. PMI has showcased the project a couple of times. It was also the basis for some of the award that I got at the PMI. Now, why I went through that, the moral is that volunteering is not as optional as we talk about it. Like, if you survey the room here, folks will say, yeah, it's something to consider when there is space for it. So we tell people, eat well, sleep well, go to the gym or work out, and then we skip volunteering. Like, volunteering fits right in the middle of those life kind of advices that we give, because not only does it set you up for opportunities that help you to explore where your interest or where your passion lies, especially as a young professional when you're just budding, you really don't know what truly excites you, and you don't want to get stuck in a career path that will drain life out of you before you know. And the further you are in your career, the switching cost of career becomes very, very high. So at the early stage, when you have the luxury of switching at will, you want to try many things. And it's not something you want to mechanically orchestrate. It has to be natural. There is a lot of authenticity that must be in this process. When I met Taufik in 2013, when we had the volunteer relationship, I did not ask him for a job. If I did that, that would pollute the relationship. I was just there doing what I love to do. Later on, when he asked for me to join the team, it was of his own will. I wasn't like sending him emails every week like, hey, do you have a gig for me or something like that? So I probably should cut it there, but if you have one more minute for me, Charles, before I joined PMI again, very recently, I'm a PhD student. I have a full-time job. PhD is a full-time gig. I teach at the university. I have my own responsibilities at the university plus a full-time job and many pet projects. In the middle of that, I attended a webinar that PMI was presenting, and they said something about a certain research that they were reporting. And I took interest in one of the data points that they listed because it has to do with my dissertation. So I reached out to the lead of the team that, hey, you said something that I'm really curious about. I would like to review your data and see what comes out of that. Trust me, if you understand what I was asking for, even my professors will say, are you okay? What exactly are you looking for? Like, you have enough work at hand and you're still looking for more trouble. But I did that. I reviewed the data. I sent the result back to them. It didn't lead anywhere. There were some constraints around data, so we really haven't done anything with that. But that signaled something to the team. It turned out to be a time when they were looking for a sustainability lead in the top leadership team. And the question I was trying to answer for them relates to sustainability. So I was still meeting with them to discuss the data analysis I did for them. And then I started to notice that the conversation was getting deeper into who are you, what interests do you have, and stuff like that. So I got a job I did not interview for because I volunteered.
You reach out to solve a problem that no one asked you. You basically asked. My wife would say, you're always asking others, how can I help? And funny enough, I find that's almost the first question I ask everyone apart from my wife. To be honest, I'm always giving and asking, how can I help? Right? It's so deep that I got to really check myself. But so when Cyrus said he got his first gig through volunteering, and he said sometimes he just have folks. I don't know about you, but if you chase the high like I do, I chase the high. Volunteering releases endorphins, the feel good fact, the feel good feelings you get when you do good for someone and the person genuinely appreciates it. I don't know how many years it adds to your life.
Mm.
My first job was not through applying. My wife again would say, I don't even think you know what it means to apply for jobs. So when people talk about job application, don't have that conversation. You're not among those. But funny enough, the jobs I applied for, I didn't really get. The ones I didn't apply for were all through volunteering. The first job I got as a consultant, during my PhD, all my folks were Iranians. And just like Jermaine, I'm like, all right, these guys are struggling with English. They're very brilliant, but what can I do to help them? I noticed they were sending their transcripts, their journals to online services to help them transcribe. That was before ChatGPT. And I decided to feel that need. Can I help you write, or can I help you review your papers? Number one. So some of them started feeling guilty. Instead of help making me their reviewer, oh Charles, can I just add you as a second or third author? And I would say yes. So before I graduated, I had close to 10 publications. How many of them was I first author? Most of them were from contributing. The first job, the guy was looking for a civil engineer. And the first thing he did was, Charles, are you through with school yet? I'm like, nope, I'm still doing my PhD. He said, I want you to come work with us. And I said, why? You've got lots of Iranian friends that are actually doctors now. They've graduated with you. Why are you not recommending them? Oh, Charles, you helped do things for me for free, so I feel like I owe you. And all of those feel good. He's already told his current bosses about it. So I walked into the interview and they were like, oh, Charles, thank you very much. Ali has said so much about you. I didn't have an interview. I had a discussion. I walked out with the job just by volunteering. Or is it the second job or the third or the fourth or the fifth or the sixth or the seventh jobs? I'll leave those stories for later, but all of them have come just on the back of being visible and volunteering. And guess what, folks? Some people haven't worked in this country for close to 5 years. So it's not a question of how long they've been here, it's a question of how consistent and intentional are you in giving back to society. Thomas, I'll let you tell us your story before we go into questions.
For sure. Thanks, Charles. And going to be tough to follow my other two gents here that just introduced themselves. But to give a little background, where I come from, where my journey is, and how this relates all to volunteering. I grew up, my mother immigrated to Canada about 50 years ago from Guyana. And I was her firstborn. And if you ever hear the story about your firstborn grows and learns about parenting and life with you, right? So I got to see that. I got to see immigrant in Canada struggle, scrape, and just get those things to ensure that myself, her child, and the other brothers and sisters I have had opportunities. And so from that young experience, it really stuck with me. It really stuck with me. That's kind of how I saw life. When I was in my teenage years, and I joined late, I joined a youth program called Cadets, right? And so I joined the cadet program, and in it, I was volunteering. Your youth giving back to youth is what the program is about. And so from there, about volunteering, it helped me refine skills, right? It had a military construct to it, but also that youth leadership construct of learning about helping one another, working together as a team, building a community towards success, right? And from there, I've always sat with that instinct of when I've done that as a youth to as I evolved to an adult, of giving back to the community. And so whether that is giving back to veterans, whether that was giving back to the Islamic community that I was a part of. It was all about what my mom did for me, was creating opportunities for others. And so I know even in my role with as the local chapter leader here, I constantly echo that to others, is let's create the opportunities that some may not even realize they don't have yet. And more creating those opportunities, those connections in the community. If you look at it, volunteering, let's go back to building a village and the people in those villages. Is anyone getting paid? Think about it, right? They're volunteering, they're coming together to build community, to build that love, to build a difference together, not only for themselves, but for the generations behind them. And that's really where creating opportunities. And if you ever ask me anything when it comes to those, is some people will say, even in the workplace, some people will say, hey, Tom, you're doing that to be promoted. You're doing that to get ahead. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of the times I resonate and say, I do it actually for my children. I do it for my boys. I put a footprint in the ground for them to follow and go further, right? And I see sometimes when we look at volunteering, we hear that, oh, the time factor. I think, Charles, you mentioned that at the start. And it's interesting enough to say, out of all the things in the world, and as we came out of a pandemic, the need for mental health balance was very key. And giving back, like you've heard Charles say, hearing someone thank you, someone appreciating, someone giving that back. Mental health wise, everyone, that is such a huge thing when it comes to volunteering. The mental health exercise, I will say, there's times where Charles, myself, Tau knows, because I've reached out to him sometimes too about I call it the mental health exercise, because yes, good and bad, right? It is a good exercise, it's a healthy exercise, whether it's emotions, whether it's your skills, whether it's your intellectual. But I find it's a good balance too, where if you're in a workplace and in a job where you're saying, hey, I know I can do more. I can actually do a lot more than what I'm being paid for right now and so on. But instead of struggling and scraping to say, I need to apply this job to show that I can do it, go volunteer. Show that, build that capacity, build that resume, that portfolio to show I can actually do it. I've got examples to show you, right? I can speak to that when I go to the next interview. Because a lot of the times what I always hear with students and newcomers in the workforce is, well, they always ask for someone more experienced. They're always asking for someone with more knowledge. And I just don't know, how do I get there? How do I get there? And I will constantly say, come and volunteer, right? Come and make it align with what you want. Build the skills where you can through volunteering. Because at the end of the day, waiting for that next job, waiting for that next title, it's not going to be handed to you. You have to go and grow. And so that's a bit of my journey to get us going, Charles.
And one thing I find from the three panelists that is consistent is they didn't just start volunteering yesterday. It all came to them naturally from a very young age. They started looking for ways to give back to the society at a very young age. So that's also something the rest of us on this call should reflect on. Have we actually been giving back and suddenly our hands are empty and no one or nothing is pouring back into it? If that's the case, it means it's time for your hands to be more open regardless of what you think your situation is. So I'm going to start this with the first question to you, Thomas. Yeah. How do newcomers and immigrants use volunteering to bypass the no local experience trap? Do I need to go back to school? How do we bypass the Canadian experience, so you have no local experience trap as immigrant professionals through volunteering?
No, Chris, Charles, that's a great question there too, and I think we are the ones that build the nose mentally, right? I truly mean it, because if you think, you can do, right? And so way to get past that with volunteering is, okay, I really want to show I can manage a team, I can support an event, I can support an outcome through project management. Get out there and volunteer, get that exposure, take the labels that are there, that are already established. You know, Charles, myself, we do say it a lot at the chapter level. There's PMI, here's the brand. Here's the sandbox. Go and do, go and show, go and shine, right? Because it's all there for you to do that in that volunteer realm, right? But if you don't want to, and you want to get stuck up on the minor details of a title, minor details of your pay as a volunteer, which we know is nothing, right? It's the rewards you invest back to you and taking advantage of that stage, taking advantage of the opportunities. I'd say also too, a lot of it comes through volunteering is networking, right? Trying to sit behind a computer or a keyboard and trying to say, hey, how come I can't get this job when I applied on LinkedIn or I applied on Indeed or I applied on the job board? It's because nobody knows who you are. You're just another set of texts and fonts. So making those connections, doing those things are very key.
Sorry, Jamin, I'll let you take that. Go on, Jamin.
I just want to build on what Thomas mentioned right now, because what is the lack of local experience? I'd like to go back and define what that is for a minute. Why does Canada require this as a mandatory, unwritten rule for people to get a job? It's a way for employers to confirm that this person in front of them knows the culture, knows how to work and behave in this culture with all the HR rules and all the legal rules and whatever, has proven that they contributed to the country, because they could have contributed elsewhere, but your employer here has no proof of that. They can't see that. And they can't even do any reference checks because you come from a different country. So this is the no local experience dilemma. But by volunteering, you gain that cultural fluency. You gain that proof of contribution. And you also gain references, people who can vouch for you. And now linking it back to what Thomas was saying, by doing all of these things, now you can apply to a job and the local experience is no longer a hurdle. It's no longer something that's preventing you from getting where you want to get. It builds you that credibility through this strategic volunteering.
Taiwo.
Yeah, that's a really good take, Jermaine. My own experience coming into Ottawa, I have not been to Ottawa when I started volunteering for OVOC. I knew I was moving to Ottawa, but the question I started asking folks in Ottawa was, in what ways can I contribute or integrate with the city? And then one of my mentors told me that, hey, I have a friend who volunteers for OVOC. Maybe I can link you both. I had a first conversation with him. He told me there are opportunities to volunteer, and I just signed up. Of course, they weren't asking me if I was local or not local. I signed up. So my first trip to Ottawa was to attend a meeting for OVOC. Now, you can call it miracle, you can call it coincidence. But the way life turned out was the location where I had that first meeting, like a block away from it, became the church that I still go till today. Like 5 minutes drive from it became the location of my first job. Like 5 minutes away from it was the first house that I lived in. About 5 minutes away from it is Algonquin College, where I had my part-time teaching opportunity. Now, when I moved to Canada eventually, I stayed in Gatineau. So it wasn't like I went to a place that I was familiar with. I stayed so far away from that location, but everything that worked out for me in Ottawa all revolved around that location. So adding to what Jermaine said, the sense of identity that you get from these volunteer experiences have a way of boosting your confidence and your social IQ in a new environment, because no matter how much proximity there is between the culture you're moving from and the new one, there will be some cultural shocks. You don't want to do that on a high-profile project or high-profile job. So organizations care about can we put this person in front of a client and not expect any backlash? And you can't blame them for looking for that. It's being responsible on their part. So how do you show that I belong here? I understand how business is done here. Volunteer, like do things that integrate you with the society. A year into Ottawa, I felt like I had lived here for 10 years. I had so many friends. When I moved to my house, we had a housewarming party, and I had about 20 people in the room that I did not know a year before that time. And the kind of bond we shared, you will think that we were childhood friends. And that is more than what money can buy. Like that is life, I will call it. I'll leave it there.
We learn by doing. That's just what we learn by doing. Because when we talk about the Canadian experience, the truth is, if every single one of us has an organization, we will ask for that Canadian experience. Because like Taiwo said, you don't want to get it from Nigerian, no matter how intelligent and brilliant he is, fresh out of a plane from Nigeria as the CEO from an organization, and put him into a high-profile contract here. Could be told he's going to struggle, right? Like I was saying to Jamin before the rest joined the call, in social studies back in those days, we were taught culture is the way of life of our people. And you can't know the way of a life of a people from not being embedded in that system or from observing, right? Now, there are also different ways to get that knowledge. You can get it from being in the organization. You can get it from conversations such as this. An immigrant professional who has been a regular attendee at this course called me a couple of months ago and said, Charles, I attended an interview, and all of the things you were talking from season 1 to season 8, it felt like I'd worked in a Canadian organization. They kept asking, and I kept saying it the way the panelists talked about it and approached it. And they said, wow, how come you know so much about how we work here? And you referenced me. And he came back and said, Charles, I actually have Canadian experience. I said, yes, because this Canadian experience, you can get it from conversations. You can get it from lived experiences. You can get it from taking notes like this. And when you have the conversations, no one thinks you're a greenhorn. So thank you for lending your voices to that questions. Now, Jermaine, what is the biggest career outcome you earned directly from volunteering? And how did you engineer it rather than hope for it? Like Taiwo said, he went to volunteer with Taufik. He didn't ask for a job. And suddenly he was leading the largest transformation project in the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, just by giving up his time. So I wouldn't say he hoped for that. He sort of quasi-engineered it or directly engineered it. So maybe that would be his biggest takeaway so far from volunteering. But Jermaine, what's the biggest career outcome or some of the biggest career outcomes you've earned directly as a result from volunteering?
I'll summarize it as leadership. Here's why. When I was part of that Lebanese Student Association, I was the one that created a few of these programs, right? So I learned how to be at a board level, how to speak at that executive level. Even though I wasn't an executive, I was a young 22, 23 years old. But I was able to develop a startup, right? A mini startup within that organization, a mini product. I came up with a mini MVP. I had to set clear goals. I had to do governance. I had fundraising targets. I had to build partnerships. We're talking about a lot of leadership aspects that one takes years sometimes to learn or to master. And if you miss the boat, you will never become a leader because you never had the chance to do those. Volunteering helped me experience those, see other do it, learn from them, and test it myself and hit the wall sometimes, but learn with zero negative impact on my job, because I didn't have a job back then. So it was a safe space, a sandbox, as you're mentioning, to test a lot of these things and to learn how do I lead and how am I as a leader? What are my gaps as a leader and where do I need to work? So in a nutshell, leadership.
Taiwo?
I would go for leadership as well. And the reason is this: it covers all the bases. As a matter of fact, I think we should also be clear on the boundary conditions for success in volunteering. That volunteering doesn't remove the responsibility that we need to have individually in different areas like education, your own personal character or emotional intelligence, or individual level of development of IQ. As a matter of fact, the kind of opportunities you will get sometimes correlate with how you present yourself individually, what level of education or what qualities you bring as a human from the get-go. And so if we establish those bases, then what you build in the course of volunteering is similar to what happens to you when you go to the gym and you lift or you do whatever routine that builds certain kind of muscles. But all these muscles, they don't function independently. They all improve the quality of your health overarchingly. And if you sum all of that together, it comes back to leadership skills or your ability to navigate varied kind of situations. So embedded in leadership, you have flexibility, you have well, you're more vast. You know about many different things at a depth that is not comparable to someone who has a mono kind of view on subjects. And your ability to interact with people and successfully increases by a good margin. So you can sum it up all up in leadership. Maybe Thomas will have a more fine-grained view on that.
Thomas, please don't say leadership.
Yeah. So I'm not going to say leadership because I was like, well, leadership is a given, but there's like Tawu was talking about, the little things that contribute to those pieces. And I would say, honestly, it gives you what volunteer and strategic volunteering really helps with everyone is survival. And when you hear me say this, take it in a grain of like, hey, it's not I'm at the edge of the cliff and I need to know what to do. But maybe it is. Because through volunteering, you learn how to do, again, you're going to hear some famous leadership terms, active listening. You're going to say, hey, methodologies and approaches with one another. I know there's times where I think I like to create a safe space. But then there's so many different cultures and dynamics in the room that what I think is okay for you to say what's on your chest and you have an open conversation might be offensive to others. That's not just in leadership, right? That is just how to communicate and how to bond and build community together, whether you're someone with a title or without a title. And that's where volunteer really comes into key of, I'm going to say know your role, if that makes sense in one regards, of, hey, if that person's standing up and starting to lead, how can I follow to help? How can I be servient to them and support them? Because I'm expecting the same when I step up, that they'll hopefully come in and support me too.
Okay. Now, funny enough, in a recent research, part of the research I conducted as during the Region 2 conference, one of the questions asked was, what is one of the barriers to people volunteering? And a surprising number of respondents claimed we really don't know where or who or what or how to go about volunteering. We have the heart, but we don't know what to do. So, Jermaine, I'll start with that. If you're coaching a newcomer or coaching someone who intends to get into the space, and my hands have been closed all this while, and I realize I got to open them, what would be your 30, 60, 90-day volunteer plan to beat the no local experience? How would you advise them to go about getting their footprints on the sands of time as far as our community is concerned? What do they do?
So I would say the first thing to do is to figure out what you want to volunteer in. And to figure that out, you have to figure out who you are and what do you want to do in your career, and where do you want to stretch yourself. Because volunteering is a powerful tool to help you discover new areas or to help you make a name for you or whatever, visibility. So figure out what that end path is. Similar to project management, right? Like you figure out what the end goal is, and then you start going back and build the building blocks. If this is my deadline, then I go back and I develop all of my milestones. Same concept. What do I want to achieve? And from there, I go back and figure out what should I do on a 30, 60, 90 days in terms of volunteering. Where should I volunteer? Should I go for PMI or should I go for somewhere else? I just came to the country. Where should I volunteer? And it's not just about going anywhere, because then it's not strategic volunteer. It's wasting time, possibly. So
but therein lies the problem. If I have made a predetermination that I want to volunteer with the PMI because that would give me visibility as a project manager, of course, we've got limited space. What if the PMI has no space for me? Is that enough reason for me to say, okay, the only place I want to volunteer is done. I'm done with this.
So
that's more like it. So what do I do if where I want to
PMI,
volunteer has no space for me?
yeah, PMI is not the only place where one can volunteer for project management. Any organization that does volunteering has multiple projects on the go. Any one of
Best
those
place.
is a gold opportunity. Exactly.
But it's the
That's
best
what I wanted
place.
to point out. That's what I wanted to point out, because people keep coming to us, to the Project Management Institute, which I happen to be the vice president of professional development. And I'm like, look, you really don't learn anything from volunteering with PMI as a project manager. Go to the non-for-profit. You have lots of them in your community. If you
Exactly.
go for your services, right? Hi, I'm PMP certified. What can I actually do for you for free? Believe me, they will jump at it. And
100%.
they've got tons of them in the community. And I'm looking at folks saying, what can I do? Nobody knows me. And I'm like, oh my goodness. These guys want me to reinvent the wheel and hit the streets and become visible from scratch all over again. Right? So, Thomas, what would be your plan? Now, Jermaine has said they can volunteer anywhere. What would you suggest? What organizations would you point them to help kickstart that journey if they actually have nowhere to turn to?
Yeah, for sure, Charles. And I think it's interesting because the word "do" stuck out right off the bat for me, right? And what can we do, right? Or what can people do? And I think the key is go and do. Just go and do. Because again, trying to strategize, sit here, draw all the lines, all the dots, and trying to get to like a 90 or 100%, okay, this is the perfect plan, isn't necessarily going to always work. So whether it's the go and the do. Now, we talk about different organizations and so on. And one thing, Charles, I know you've heard me say it too, just recently, even at our last network session, is if you ever have heard me say this, is the power of the ask.
The power of the ask.
Sometimes people will sit there and think the answer is going to be no. I want to go do that, but it's going to be no. Or I want to go over to PMI and it's going to be no. Well, you don't know until you ask. And so the power of the ask, if it's a no, it meets your expectations. You go on about your day, right? It hasn't disappointed you. It met your expectation. But that's the difference. If you do the power of the ask, that is what may open doors. That may come out with suggestions. I know Charles, when people have asked him at the chapter, hey, I want to volunteer, his response is, okay, we don't have a spot for you, but come out to our networking events, come promote us on social media, still give back to that community of volunteering, right? And helping. So when it comes to a 30, 60, and 90-day plan, there are other organizations locally in the city. There's Volunteer Ottawa here in Ottawa. There's Volunteer Canada. Giving back to youth programs are always in need, right? Whether it's at the church level, whether it's even the local community youth programs, I always strongly encourage it. But you have to just not sit there and keep scrolling and hopefully TikTok will give you an answer. It is, I have to put the phone down and go do. I have to need to connect and I need to network. I need to poke. If I really want it, I will really poke and poke hard to get there too.
Now, we've talked about volunteering as a way to get visible, not just in the community. Now, let's take that into our corporate world or to our offices where we actually think we're paid, right? how can we, within our organizations that were paid, be involved in volunteering activities to strategically position ourselves? So what are some strategies we can use? What can we do to use volunteering as another key to unlock acceleration or growth within organizations? Because I know it's a potent weapon folks use. So Jermaine, you want to tell us some ways we can use volunteering as a tool to improve our visibility, get promoted easily within organizations? I can share a couple of ideas later on, but I want to hear your thoughts on this.
So the way I look at it is you have to get to a place where you get to where you want. Okay, so how do I use volunteering as a tool? If I lack visibility, let me join a volunteering role that gives me visibility. If I lack decision making, let me join a committee or a group where I can develop my decision making skills. If I lack something, let me join a committee or a volunteering group that allows me to fill that gap. If I were to answer in a blanket, I would say join someplace where, number one, you're giving value back to a specific cause that you believe in,
Mhm.
and join someplace where decisions happen and where you can really make those decisions happen.
Mhm.
And I'll give an example here just to explain that. And no disrespect to any kind of volunteering, but you can volunteer at a concert and be the parking attendant, telling the cars to go forward. That's fun. You get attendance to the concert for free. That's great. But in terms of career building, it may not really help you much unless you actually meet some interesting people there while you're getting the cars forward. But however, if you join a volunteering space where you can do better decisions or more impactful decisions, such as in finance and governance and event planning, like join the planning group for that concert instead of joining this as a volunteer to just get the cars going. Spending 2-3 hours in the right room with right people will give you more capital than anything else.
Okay, Thomas, you raised your hand.
Yeah.
Let's take you next.
Sorry, just to feed off what George is saying too. One thing I will say: when you join, don't join and sit. Don't join and wait to be fed, like spoon fed. Right? You're not in a high chair. Right? You're in a common chair in the room. Go learn. Go. That hunger you have, go out and find it. Look at what other people do that you want to learn from. Look out in different, which we always promote. Look at different chapters. Look at different people. What are they doing well? Go learn from them. Right? Find that mentor, whether it is when you're volunteering here or a mentor that's not even part of the same volunteer program. That is also very helpful too, right? To match.
And sometimes stand in the corridor. I'll give a little story to illustrate why I say stand in the corridor. There's been a sponsor or someone I've been trying to get on her radar for a long time, but she's either very busy, captain of industry. I couldn't get her to notice me, right? So what did I do? I started looking for events that she puts together. She's an active volunteer, so I know she's passionate about volunteering. Look for events that she put together. I would attend the event, make sure she sees me, goes to introduce myself. Oh my goodness, you're doing a fantastic job. How can I help? And a couple of times, oh no, because again, she didn't know. So what was I doing? I knew I would need her as a plug in the future to make a connection to another plug that would give me the job that I need. Right? So it's like playing chess. Volunteering is like playing chess. You got to think 4, 5, 6 moves ahead. What am I doing today that will strategically position me for tomorrow? That's why volunteering becomes strategic. So I volunteered my time. That's what I mean by this, to attend her events just so she could start seeing more of me. She didn't know who I was. She didn't know my name, but she started associating my face with her events. This guy is actually a supporter. By the time I did that 3 times, the 4th time I reached out, instantly now she's among one of my greatest allies. Why? Just by being visible in causes she was passionate about. That's a move. So when we say there are no jobs for immigrant professionals because we're not as visible as we should be, My question back to us is, how many of us are actually building relationships that we can leverage? How many of us are actually getting out of our houses to attend networking events on Eventbrite, on Ticketmaster, that we don't know who organized, just because we want to have our footprints on the sands of the community? It's getting difficult. Someone said to me, I've applied. And I said to him, I'm sure all of the jobs you applied for, no one even opened your CV. Because I do a vacancy for one opening, I get 200 CVs. I'm not even looking at the 200 CVs. I'm just saying, all right, random number generator. I'll take 5 of the CVs. Number 5, 15, 22, 25, and 48. Guess what? I do a random generator on my computer. I take those 5 CVs. The remaining, I don't even open it. And guess someone may be among those that don't get open. But the gentleman says to me, Charles, I submitted Rita's CV, or I'm recommending Rita. Instantly, Rita becomes a candidate. I want to look at her CV in more detail. So he is separated from the number generator nonsense. Why? Leveraging relationships. We gotta do that more. Okay. Jermaine, he called strategic volunteering a mini lab for leadership. And I know you actually do lots of these presentations. Would you be able to, if you're designing a presentation flow for a volunteer, what governance do you think would count as a demo? I know I use the word governance and why I use the word demo. If you're designing a volunteer flow, if you're designing a volunteer conversation starter, right? Charles, you're going to go into a networking event, and these networking events are full of CEOs, and I really don't know what to do. I don't know how to have a conversation. I'm socially awkward, and I'm coming to you for a script. I'm going to have different folks of different industries. How would you advise I approach conversations like that? Because lots of us, again, why we don't attend these events? We are socially awkward. We can't contribute to that conversation because we can't talk about hockey, we can't talk about the weather, and you really need to do small talk. And look, how do we navigate all of these barriers?
So a couple of things. First, if you're volunteering in an event where you don't think that you culturally fit by default, then you need to do a lot of research in advance to learn what the culture is, so that when you go to that event, you know who you're speaking with, what their culture is, and then you can adapt accordingly. But if you're also volunteering in an event where you know the culture, like let's say a gala event with people from your own country, if you just came to Canada from your own home country, then it makes it a bit easier. So it depends on which approach you want to go. You want to go the full-on, very difficult approach, or go a step in the middle. Either way, research. Where am I going? Who's my audience? What am I going to tell to them? How will I present myself? What is their first impression of me? Am I going in traditional clothing? Am I going in shorts and tank top? Right? Big difference. So you probably saw my post a few days ago, Charles, on LinkedIn. I go with an Eldridge knot tie. It's a fancy tie. It takes 5 minutes to make. Okay, literally. First time, maybe 10 minutes. Second time, 5 minutes. 5 minutes to make, and it is a conversation starter every single time. I am not somebody that is extrovert, that will come into the room and just do something and people will notice me. I'm not that person. I am one of those that go into the room and read the room and very calmly and wait until somebody speaks to me. With that tie, I can tell you that every single event I went to, people spoke to me. If it's an event where one wears a suit and tie. Sometimes that is not the right setting. My point is, first appearances matter a lot. After that, questions. Like we go to a volunteer event or we go to a networking event and we try to make an impression. Most of the time, it's one main person with 6, 7 people around that main person. Could be the decision maker, could be the hiring manager, could be whatever. Do I just stand there? No. I already have a list of questions to ask them. If I have done my research, I know what to ask them. And even if I have not done my research, there's a couple of questions that are good conversation starters. Like, based on what you just presented to us, Mr. or Mrs. Panelist, can you tell me like a book that changed your career and carved the way you think to get you where you are today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's a very generic question, but that's a question that that person cannot not answer. That's a question that pushes them to think, and to think that you have done some research and you're genuinely interested also in what you're asking. If it's a book that you read, even better, bonus points. Now you created some kind of similarities, and now that person knows something about you and they can recognize you next time you speak to them.
Taiwo, how do you do it? I can imagine how working with the PMI is with lots of people from different nationalities, and sometimes you just want to walk through without having a conversation with anyone. So I think we could draw from some of your experiences when we attend these networking events that we don't know anyone. We just attended because we saw it advertised somewhere and we're trying to grow our network and we're shy, right? How do we break out of this to start getting noticed or get into the room and leave with a positive impression? Because it's all about relationship building.
I will tell you what has worked for me and less of what you should do, but you might get something from what I do.
Yes, please.
One, I'm not as extroverted as sometimes people think I am. Like, I'm very shy in public settings. And so I keep in mind that what matters most is that I remain my authentic self. And what that means, like Jermaine said, is I don't necessarily have to walk up to someone. I can literally be by myself the entire event and have no interaction. However, there are activities that naturally will make people to gravitate towards you. Maybe you're in a speed dating kind of conversation within a professional setting, but some things will bring people. When that finally happens, what matters more is to listen. Listen to people. Sometimes not just listen, look at them and try to understand where they're coming from, what they're bringing. That usually will be enough to create conversations that are impressionable. It's not in the quantity of the words you exchange with people, it's the impression that they take away from the interaction that will determine how they remember you. Many times they would go, they can't remember what conversations you had, but they would have an impression or a memory of if your conversation with them was positive or negative, or just forgettable. So it matters that we understand or we listen to let what is said within the conversation drive the conversation. I also find out that people like when you're interested in them or when you're interested in what they do. So ask them questions about things that they seem to be proud of. Someone, for instance, has received an award. As shy as I am, I don't mind walking up to them and saying, "Hey, congrats! Tell me more about this project that got you this award." They can tell you to even schedule a 1-hour coffee chat later on to tell you more about that, and they just never forget you for that. So, for me, the first thing is authenticity. When I'm authentic, I can spend the entire day having a conversation because everything that's happening is natural. And if in my natural state we fail to establish connection, I really don't want to know you. I really don't want to have anything to do with you because it's going to be difficult to keep that relationship. But if in my natural state we were able to establish some baselines that make interactions easy, then that is a relationship I can count on. When I first met Thomas, like, it was a casual conversation, but now we talk like brothers, and there's nothing artificial about that. That is an easy relationship. So authenticity, I would take away as the most important in those kind of public social settings.
And Thomas, what advice would you get? Because again, lots of us don't get out to these conversations because I'm gonna be the only black person there, so I'm just gonna feel socially awkward. I won't go, right? But if you find the five of us or the four of us as panelists, we connected based on our volunteer careers, not our professional careers. And that says something. You would also find that you have more allies or more supporters within those you meet informally than the folks within your organization that you bleed with, basically, if I'm going to use that term. So what does that say in essence? That a family you actually create to create, it's not in your organizations. It is in the community. It is through you giving back. Or when you give back, you find what you call your tribe. So as immigrant professionals, it is very important we find our tribe. And the earlier you find your tribe, the easier it is for you. So for most folks, when they concentrate on getting a job, I'm like, you should be concentrating on building your tribe. But once you build that tribe, it becomes way easier to get a job. Right? Thomas, you were going to say something before I interrupted. Yeah.
It's perfect, Charles. No, it's good. It ties in with a couple of pieces there too. So I'm going to take it from, new, shy, the introvert angle of things. And it's sometimes, I'm going to say the key word is consistency. So if you show up to the first event, the first networking, and don't say a thing, it's okay. I'm more of a people watcher, okay, and I'll be full transparent there because I like to see the room, see the dynamics, know, okay, what are great places to jump in and have a conversation.
I just like to dive into the room and dive into first and scatter the room.
But I'm gonna say consistency. Keep showing up, right? The first time you might show up and not, okay, I'll just enjoy the snacks and the drink, and I might not even talk to someone. I might talk to someone. But if you consistently show up and you consistently are there, folks in that networking session are consistently showing up and are there. Because then they'll say, hey, I've seen this person every time. Let me go actually reach out. Let me go connect with them too, right? And so, again, it's okay on the first time or the first couple networking sessions or events you go to that in your mind, you're not getting that perfect conversation or that perfect interaction or that great takeaway. But you have to come back consistent every time. Keep showing up and keep challenging yourself little by little while you get in there to have those connections. And that'll help build that confidence to walk in the room and go from someone like me, observer, I'm okay to be, hey, I'll be standing in the back if anyone wants to come talk right to me, versus as you heard Charles, we'll come in the room and light the room up, right? And create connection right away.
All right, thank you. Taiwo, you've been volunteering for a very long time. What is one myth about volunteering that you want to bust? I know you're a myth buster. You bust some myths on sustainability. Let's see you bust some myths on volunteering. What is one myth about volunteering you really want to bust? Lots of people come into volunteering with huge expectations or some they think it's. I'm not. All right, I'll let you take that before I dive into your answer without knowing.
I think there's a common perception, and we can test it in this room, that volunteering is for early career, young professionals, low lives, people who still are struggling to find what to do. And that's one perception that I hope we can address here, that no, it's not at all. I have what I call the Maslow's pyramid of volunteering, right? So Maslow's idea is that people have different needs at different stages of life, and that what stage of life you are will drive what you're interested in. And so while I don't go into that, the same thing applies in volunteering, where if you are still at the early stage of the career, you certainly have certain kind of needs that will drive what kind of volunteering you do. But because you're no longer at that level does not mean volunteering ends. As you climb up that ladder, the highest of Maslow's hierarchy is self-actualization, where you have technically everything you need. There is still volunteering happening at that point. And a classic example would be someone like maybe President Obama, or Peter Obi, if you're Nigerian here. He's a presidential aspirant in Nigeria, very popular among the youth and the present generation. And he got into a backlash recently where he was volunteering at an occasion, and there he was seen to be serving plates to guests at the event. And people took to social media saying this was theatrics, it wasn't necessary. Why will he engage in such practices to just hurt voters and all that? And then he came in his own defense to say that at that event, there were lots of other supposed big shots, those you call billionaires and all that, who were serving. And they set up the event basically for that, to signal servanthood, to signal that at any level of life you are, there's still a need for service. So a society that isn't accustomed to that took an offense that someone they looked up as a leader was serving. But here you would see someone like Obama volunteer for a cause that he believes in. And that's what I think happens, that as you go from that early career stage where the kind of job I want to do determines what kind of volunteering I do. Thomas actually said something that we didn't ask him to unpack. He said strategic volunteering. I hope he gets a chance to break that down. But when he said that, it caught my thinking. At the early stage of your career, you're being very strategic and choosing what will improve your opportunities career-wise. But a time comes where you've seen it, you've done that, you don't need job from anybody. At this point, what do? There are causes, there are purposes, there are things that are important to you that keep you up at night. For me, it could be sustainability. For you, Charles, it could be building community. For Temisan, it could be helping people who are looking for jobs to get a less friction path towards their job. But
basically, the meat you're busting is volunteering is not for early career professionals. But we seem to think in this part of the world that it's for early career professionals. As we're saying, something triggered in my head. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, what is self-actualization? Is top of the pinnacle. Mm-hmm. Right? Self-actualization is the idea that an individual can be the best version of themselves and live the best life and give back to society. And when you find, right, that all of the folks that we think are self-actualized are people who've made so much money and they realize, what am I doing with all of this money? I gotta go to Nigeria like Melina Gates, Bill Gates' wife, carrying bucket on her head, fetching water from the stream, the local stream, the thing she's never done her entire life, just to encourage the local things that it can be done. That's volunteering. So you find that as you climb high the ladder, Taiwo, like you rightly said, there becomes a need, a deep seated need to want to give back. I was speaking to a friend, she's on this call yesterday, and she said, now I just want to pour off myself to the community. Mm-hmm. I'm done with working for the government. I left at the pinnacle of my career, and people were asking, why are you leaving now? We all want you. And she's like, no, I want to leave now while I still have a little more strength to pour. And she said it and she was laughing, but that statement left a profound impact on me. Jermaine, what myths do you want to bust about volunteering? Perhaps I'll give you a chance. I know you're a myth buster also. What myths do you want to bust about volunteering? There are lots of them. What myths are you busting today for us?
Sorry, I missed the question. What?
Myths.
Myth.
Yeah. Myth would be
okay.
So yes, MYT. Yep. Forgive my accent. We all have accents, yeah. So forgive.
No, we all have accents.
Yeah, so
we all have accents.
Whatever. Myth. What?
I just have a 2-year-old crying in the background. That's why.
Gotcha.
So the biggest myth I'd like to bust about volunteering is that it is unpaid work. Okay, volunteering is not unpaid work. You are being paid. You're gaining. It doesn't matter if you're being paid. You're gaining. Okay, you're paying yourself. You're paying yourself in skills, in networking, in opportunities. You position yourself to gain from it. If people believe that they're going to an event as a volunteer and they're wasting their time, then they should not go. This is not unpaid work. You are your own career manager. You are the best career manager that you'll ever have. And you only have you to push yourself up to the next level. So you have to know if it doesn't make sense to go to that event, don't go. If it doesn't make sense to say yes for this thing they're asking you to do, then don't do it. Say no. Appearing busy doesn't mean you're actually doing the right thing. It's about doing the right things that are good for you. You have to be egoistic at some point, right? But by helping others, you're helping yourself from a networking perspective, from a growth perspective, from a skills perspective. So it is not unpaid work. It pays a lot.
I love that. So two myths busted. Volunteering is not for early professionals. Volunteering is not unpaid work. That's a good segue to one of the interviews I had in my first position as a people leader or people manager in Canada. When I got into the interview, they were like, all right, we're looking at your background. You have lots of experiences, but you've not led a team in Canada. Guess what? That was the Canadian experience. And I laughed. I said, nope, I have led teams. And like, what are the teams that you've led in Canada? And like in my role with the Project Management Institute, I didn't say in my role volunteering with the Project Management Institute. And like in my role in the Project Management Institute, I've done X, Y, Z. And the guy said, oh, is that paid or unpaid? But that's volunteering. And for me, I think every question or every time you're challenged, it gives you an opportunity to just boost people with your brilliance. Right? And he said, no, but that's unpaid. And I said, no. In project management and in life, there are two kinds of benefits, the tangible and the intangible. In projects, we get the tangible, we are paid, and the intangible, we are not paid. As an organization, you get the tangible benefits and you get the intangible. Would you say you're not prospering because you're only getting tangible benefits? I turned the question into a question. My guy looked at me. And I felt the ability to just speak freely and challenge him and turn it. He was like, all right, nicely said, Charles. And I smiled to myself. But at least I acknowledged that it was nicely said. So two things happened. I used my volunteering opportunity. Most of the things you see me do were gotten from volunteering positions all through my life. Before I started teaching, I started volunteering to teach my classmates from University of Benin. And truth be told, you have folks, I know folks that were students with me. I was not the most brilliant in my class, no. I was not among the top 10. But I knew some certain aspects of civil engineering that no one else knew. So I took just that part and left all of the first class scholars and said, give me 5 minutes every week. Let me explain this concept. In Uniben then, my notes, my exam nuggets, it was hot cake. They were buying it. Because I'll take past questions from years back and answer. And now do tutorials on. That was my niche, even before I knew I was going to teach. Right? So how do we articulate this? So when I was asked again in an interview, my first teaching position, have you thought I've been teaching all my life? And the interviewer looked at me and smiled. What do you mean, Charles? I'm like, all right. In Uniben, I taught my classmates. They're like, really? So that means I was actually teaching my peers, not those I knew more than. That's called a point. So again, it was volunteering that I articulated and emboldened me. So why this? Volunteering is not unpaid. Volunteering is the most paid position you can ever get because all of the benefits are intangible and they stay with you and they leave a mark. Okay, let's take a quick question from Faith. How does one answer an awkward question in an event? Questions like, what is your plan if the project fails? Project questions like, what are you doing right now and how do you plan to get to where you want to get to? I had a friend attended an event with me and he was standing by the corner. I said, Charles, I can't go with you there because I don't have any profile. If they ask me what am I doing right now, I'll be embarrassed to say what I'm doing. So he deliberately did not engage. So I can feel Faith's question. How do you answer an awkward question in an event, especially if it has to do with your career, your plan if a project fails, why you are here, why you're doing what you're doing, and you know you're not probably in the right mix because they're all more qualified than you and you feel threatened. What do you do? Jermaine.
I'm happy to answer this question. So for context, I teach presentation skills at university, and I'm going to answer in the exact same way. There is one method that I use that I'd like to share with everybody. It's called the touch, bridge, and go method. You're basically touching that question. So you're acknowledging the question. You're bridging, so transitioning to your message, and then you go with your message. Now, the tough part is knowing what your message is. So I'm going to ask Faith, you need to know what your story is. Why are you at this event? What are you trying to achieve? And that's the message you need to push. I'm not saying to not answer the question. I'm saying that your answer to the question has to be focused around your story. Not necessarily around what they're asking you and just what they're asking you. It doesn't have to be a generic answer. It has to be linked to exactly what your story is. So if you don't know your story, then it's going to be a very tough question and very awkward time. But if you've practiced, if you've trained, if you prepared for it, you know what your story is and you can answer it in the best possible way.
Nice. Taiwo?
I have something to add to that.
Yes, please.
So when you are in a social setting like that, first and foremost, every interaction is a social activity. The person asking you the question can ask Google, can ask literally anybody. So choosing to ask you that question is an opportunistic kind of scenario where they consider that as maybe an icebreaker to get conversations going. So first and foremost, you need to understand how important the question is to them. So you should not feel uncomfortable about not answering a question that someone really doesn't care about and they just want to have a good chat with you. That's the first thing. But something I am also learning to practice more and more is the idea that I don't have to have answer to every question, no matter how ostensibly it is that I should have answer to it. If I haven't thought about it before, it's part of being authentic to be able to say that, yeah, that's a really good question that I need to reflect more about. I saw a commencement speech by Steve Jobs where they asked him a question and he took about 18 seconds pause before he would answer it. And what he had to say after 18 seconds rewarded the audience because he answered correctly, or he answered in a very impressionable way. And so that's something you need to be conscious of, that it's not necessarily answering the question that matters. It is the outcome of that social interaction that matters. So if you follow the what Jermaine just said about touching the question, acknowledging that, yeah, that's a question, but still coming back to what you want to push as a narrative. In all of that, what matters is, at the end of this interaction, what will this person remember? That I answered the question correctly, or that this interaction mattered or is memorable. And so if you pause and you feel like you don't have an answer, acknowledge the question, tell them you're going to think about it. And last thing I'm going to say is, sometimes just probe them. You can ask for the context of the question. You can ask for, of all the questions that of all the things we can talk about right now, there must be something that made that to be important to you. Can you bring me into your thought space, and that can help me while I reflect over how I answer your question. Now you've thrown it back to them, and they probably will be answering the question themselves.
It was almost something Jermaine said, right? You got to touch, bridge, and go. Right, that bridging could be a redirection, like you said earlier again, Tyree. Everybody wants to talk about themselves. So someone throws a question at you and you redirect that question at them. Oh my goodness, it just gives them an opportunity to yap. And from experience, everybody wants to yap about themselves, especially when they're doing good work. Taiwo, I know, is very quiet, but if you probe him, he thinks the need to fill up the silence. And it's not going to fill up the silence with a talk that is valueless. He's going to fill up the silence with his accomplishments, his projects, himself, and hope that inspires you. So, touch, redirect, and bounce. That's a way to answer awkward questions, especially in networking events. This question is very, very important because I had a conversation with someone yesterday. Charles, I don't go to your events because when I go to your events, you know everyone. Everyone is either a project manager, a director. And I'm like, no, I'm not a director. He said, oh yeah, but everyone there has a profile. I don't seem to have a profile. And Temisa, I'll come to you. That lifts me quickly towards Landry said. Charles, I'm still struggling to get my foot in. How do we help him with his struggle? Temisa, I'll let you take the floor.
Yeah, so my first answer was for the previous conversation before I segue.
Let it go.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to say kudos to Faith for even summoning up, I don't know if it's courage or clarity to ask that question.
Yeah.
Because as you could tell, Charles has just given multiple instances of conversations around that. And we get that a lot, right? In terms of, even our peers too, sometimes. Like, I couldn't come for your event because, like, I'm not there yet. I've not had my PMP. I'm not where you guys are. I don't know what that even means, right?
Yeah.
But the bigger thing I quickly uncovered was the being able to check the emotions around the ask, gives more clarity in how you communicate. So I say that because if you're asked that question, what makes it awkward? Is it the environment or is it your story?
Our story usually.
Okay.
We feel like we're a fish out of water. It's like we go to a party and everyone has a Rolex and you have
exactly. So I think the underlying issue is not really about the environment, it's really about the story, right?
Yeah.
And because everyone's story, like back to what Jeremy talked about, the communication part and presentation part is key. I think everyone here on this call really has an awesome journey that has brought everyone to this call. And I think spending time to learn how to effectively communicate that you're already 90% there.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my conversation. Then the next question was asking how you get your foot in the door. There's no one way, but this is a way. If you're on this call, then I think you're holding the doorknob already, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no blueprint there's no surefire blueprints to getting past the door. What you need, or what I find is the common denominator across board, regardless of the size of the door or how big the building is consistency in your character.
Consistency.
Will Jermaine say, I know this person is really, really like, it has so much grit and drive? Will Charles say this person has so much grit and drive? Will Thomas say this person has so much grit and drive? For example, there are some folks that like volunteer at the chapter that if we didn't help them get jobs, then we're doing a disservice to ourselves because they were just awesome and standout talents, right? I think how you get yourself in the door is, first of all, figure out your own story, figure out how you can help, figure out the gaps in your skill sets that even the volunteering space, as Jermaine said, can help you. And you're already 80% there. So thanks.
Thank you. Jermaine.
Just adding a bit to that. Thanks, Tennyson. Landry, give you an example. 20 years ago, when I arrived in Canada, I sent 500 resumes to get into, at least to get 2 interviews. That's what I got, 2 interviews out of 500 resumes. And I failed these 2 interviews drastically. But what this gave me, like, it's a slap in the face, right? I'm hitting a wall. I'm here. Everybody's telling me either I'm overqualified or I'm underqualified, but I'm doing something wrong. This is what it told me. It told me I'm not doing either the right process or I don't have the right resume. So I went back and looked into what I was doing. And I got to a point where I got the interview, I got the job with help. Obviously, I had my resume reviewed a dozen times. And every single person tells me, remove this, and the other tells me, add this. Like it's conflicting advice that you get left and right. It doesn't matter. Go through the process until you figure out what works. And when we're talking about doors, so yes, I opened that door to myself and I got into the room, and then I opened another door and got into another room, and now I'm opening all the doors that I closed behind me to other people. But there's always a door in front of you. So right now I'm trying to open the next door for myself, while at the same time trying to open the door behind me to others. And that's the game. We're always going to be in that mental struggle where we're trying to get the foot in. It's just at different levels, at different doors. I'm trying to get my foot in, just at a different door. So, right? So we're always in that. So it's not about struggling. It's about enjoying being in that struggle. Because when you're in that struggle, it means you're actually improving. You're pushing yourself to improve. And then when you feel that you're no longer struggling and things are getting handed to you, then maybe something's wrong. Maybe you need to push yourself out of the box to the next limit to feel that struggle again, to push yourself again to that next door.
I love the way Jermaine framed it, because it's easy for those that are looking for what we call their daily bread to think those who have their daily bread are comfortable or enjoying the daily bread, right? Or have no challenges. So, like Jermaine alluded to, for every stage in your career, there is a door you're struggling to get into and a door you're leaving behind. Lots of folks have been in the public sector for years. They've not risen above a certain level. Lots of folks have been in the organizations for years. They still earn within a certain wage bracket within the last 5 or 6 or 7 or 9 years. Apart from the 3.5 they get every year, that's still what they get, right? So the door never ends. Taiwo.
Just a quick one, that second. Also be careful with neediness in this process. People want to relate to people who don't need anything from them. The moment they sense that you might need something, it just brings trust from here to here. You might have nothing, you might need what the person is holding right in their hand, but if you are grounded in your place enough to not care about what they have in their hand until you establish a connection with them, they might be the one volunteering it for you. Like, hey, I actually have this? You might need it from what we've just discussed. But if you come straight and say, hey, I want that, it's a natural repulsion that they just start to feel like, I'm not sure about this person. So be careful.
Nobody wants to owe anybody, or nobody wants to feel like they owe anybody. And that's another thing we find in volunteer relationship, where it is very transactional, right? I want XYZ from the chapter. Once I get it, I'm done, because I've done what I want to do. But when you start looking at these relationships as translational, it's not transactional, it's not give and take. It's something you give on one end to one person and get from another end from another person, another process entirely. But most times, we're stuck in this loop. I'm giving to this point. This is the place I should be receiving from, right? 90% of the time, or more than half of the time that I've seen, you almost never get directly from where you're pouring yourself from. Is the people that see it, that open up the opportunities to you. Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. And to echo kind of what we're talking about right now too, is there will be struggles. There will be those pieces where it's tough, and if it's hard. But like Taiwo mentioned too, if you go in the conversation and you're focused on taking that thing that person has, or you want a piece of it, remember the person probably struggled, battled, tore muscle, rebuilt that muscle to get where it is. And what you can do as a volunteer, as that community around them, is how can I support you? Because naturally they'll turn around and say, you've supported me, you've understood my struggle, you've understood where I've built this thing to. I'm going to give you it. You don't have to ask for it. It'll be handed to you. But if you don't come in with that community focus, or hey, how can I help with that person who's built that strength, that muscle over time, has built whatever that I really would want to be a part of, or I really want to own too, is realize from your own experiences that took time, that took effort. That might have been done alone. Now people are around to help. Wow, I'm willing to give the gift back too.
All right, so let's take the quick last question from Emmanuel before we do a quick round table, because we're almost approaching the hour. Quickly, don't go on a sermon, just make it brief. What are the correlations between trust and volunteering? Hi, darling. Hey.
She's not hearing.
Wait. Oh, she needs to hear, sweetie pie. Jermaine, put it on her ears. I need to hear her. All right, we'll come to that later. What are the correlations between trust?
He just woke up, so he's not happy now.
I took away his daddy time. I'm sorry, baby. I owe you candy. Quick one, Thomas. What are the correlations between trust and volunteering? And how does trust influence volunteering effort? This is a question from Emmanuel Okoye. Correlation between trust and volunteering, and how does trust influence volunteering efforts? Quickly, in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would say trust is pretty much a magnet that draws people in, right? And it's the glue that also keeps them and retains them to be around. And so I would say that would help any capacity, any of those things you need to get to really resonate and go with the same purpose and drive that we all want.
Taiwo, correlation between trust and volunteering, and how do you build trust as a new person in the scene or volunteering within a scene?
You can't hide. You can't hide what exists inside of you for so long. If in your mental, if the motivation is not aligned with what you say as your intention, easily it will come out in the process of interaction. So I think Thomas said it all. If trust is broken, it changes everything. Like, especially in a volunteer kind of situation where we're not bound by contract, we're not bound by any obligation. I freely choose who I bring into my circle and freely choose who I delete from that space. So if I'm constantly confused by, on one hand, you claim you want to serve, but on the other hand, it seems you have your eyes on something, it becomes a question of what exactly are we doing here?
I have a problem if you have your eyes on something, because in every general interest, there is a personal interest. But when the personal interest supersedes the general interest, it becomes a conflict of interest, right? We all volunteer because we want to feel good, we want to give back, we want to be visible. So there is a personal and selfish interest. And there's no crime in that.
What's important is how you present those. You remember I said alignment matters. Exactly. If in your presentation it's clear that these are your intentions and you're working in alignment with stated intentions, then we know exactly what we're dealing with. But if on one hand you have a stated intention that is not matching the vibe that we're getting from you, it generally creates a question of trust, and that usually will necessitate people distancing themselves. And if you're not in the circle, it's not even a good use of your time volunteering in that kind of space.
Trust is synonymous with consistency, because if you're not consistent, again, you breach that trust. I've trusted you with the responsibility, and you pour out your heart today, tomorrow you're not there. The strain you put on the downstream is massive, because it's a volunteer downstream, right? So, all right, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. So I wanted to throw out there too, kind of summarize a bit of what I was saying before too, is trust turns goodwill into capacity at the end of the day, right? This is not only just volunteering. I'll tell you from a military stance, when we're flying, all those pilots you see flying the fancy jets, they call their crew by first name, which is a little different in the military hierarchy construct of sirs and ma'ams, right? But it's about trust. It is about that tech over there is going to turn that bolt even tighter before I jump behind this aircraft and fly at Mach 3, right? So trust is very key, and we have to realize that, again, it comes back to where volunteering comes in is again, there's personal purpose, I get it, there's that community purpose. And when you're aligned, that's where the trust builds really strong, and people can turn and say, let's tackle the next thing over here because I trust over here is running smoothly.
Timmy-san. You're on mute, baby.
Sorry. So there's a high correlation between trust and volunteering, to your question, very high. And people really downplay the amount of intrinsic guardrails and safeguards around volunteering. And it also spots actual volunteers from fraud, right? There's no in between, right? There's no in between. And after, like, we talk about the personal agenda, when you have the email domain for the PMI, and then what? When you share it on LinkedIn, I'm happy to announce this and add it to your experience. And then what?
And then
right?
what?
And I think beyond that, once you see that, according to Taiwo, because there are no, like, for the larger sense of it, like contracts in place, we could tell that, and then after a while, we're like, sorry, there's no alignment, and we let you go, right? And also, just to put it out there, volunteering is not an activity to pass the time when you're in between jobs.
No.
It's not. I've just called it as it is. When it's like, hey, I did a job, I need to volunteer at PMI, I did a job, right? No, I can't help you with that because you just told me why you need it.
If I had my way, volunteering would not be open to those looking for jobs.
Well,
volunteer positions would be only for those who have actual employment. If you want to volunteer without a job, go do a community project. Ask PMI to support you, because the truth is, when you go do a community project and PMI supports you, my goodness, you're giving yourself visibility. But because you're lazy, you want to write on someone else's blood and sweat. You want to come volunteer with PMI. That is someone else's blood and sweat.
Yeah.
Charles, please.
No, yeah, but it's sad I have to agree nowadays, because I know how many times people get jobs and just disappear. And so, and what you hear is, I have been busy. Like, you know, so we are jobless.
We're very jobless.
So it's not, so to my point, yeah, so to wrap up, it's not an activity to undertake when you're in between jobs, right? So I just thought to throw that in there.
I hope the volunteer on your minds are not on this call.
No, it's not. Even if they are, I mean, even if they are, but what I'm saying is, for those even thinking of it on the call, you won't go far. Yeah. Right? If you adopt that mindset, right?
You won't go far.
If you adopt that mindset.
The truth is, I say to people, Jermaine is a people leader in Ottawa. I am, by God's grace, also a people leader. If you volunteer with me and leave a bad taste in my mouth, truth be told, you've burnt more bridges than you've built. Because in my mind, I can't refer you for a position. So please don't volunteer with Charles Igwe, or please don't volunteer with Telisa or Taiwo, because you kill your career more than you help it by volunteering with us and running away. I will never make a recommendation. That is the gospel truth. Never. Jamil.
Charles, you were mentioning that I have never volunteered with PMI. That's why. Because I know you're there. I know what's going to happen.
Get you on board, my darling. I'm getting you on board.
So back to the question that Emmanuel asked. And I know Charles likes to write LinkedIn posts around these firesides. So I'm going to give you a sound bite here. Trust is the currency of volunteering. That's how you look at it.
That's it.
Without trust, there is no real volunteering. People don't give their time. People don't trust you. And even if you actually give your time, you're not going to do anything out of it, because, as Charles mentioned, you left a bad taste in their mouth if there's no trust. Yep. If they ask you to do something and you don't deliver on it, that's a bad taste. You haven't gained anything from volunteering. However, with trust, volunteering is amazing. That's how you're showing up. You're coming in with your full creativity. You're developing your network. The person you're volunteering for, or the organization you're volunteering for, is giving you a lot of potential, a lot of leadership potential. Go deliver this, do it. And then every hour volunteers become a great investment in you and a great capital for you, for the organization you're volunteering with, and for society as a whole. So trust is the currency. Trust is the currency of volunteering.
Thank you, Jermaine. All right, 9 more minutes. I'll do a quick round table with this. You're going to finish this sentence. So that means you're just ending the sentence. You're not telling us a story. So think about it. Volunteering is a strategic tool when I'm going to put it in the chat. I'll give us a couple of minutes to think of how to finish this sentence. And it's for everyone on the chat, everyone on the call. It's not just for the panelists. If you're taking something out of this conversation, put it in the chat so we can all learn from each other if you've learned anything. So Jermaine, I'll start with you. I'll come to Taiwo. I'll go to Thomas. I'll take the Nissan. And if we've got any comments in the chat, I'll read those out and I'll get us out of here on the top of the hour or before the top of the hour. So Jermaine, finish the sentence. Volunteering is a strategic tool when it's...
You know, I have to use my career coaching. Volunteering is a strategic tool when it stretches you beyond your comfort zone and helps you build the career that you want.
Volunteering is a strategic tool when it stretches you beyond your comfort zone and helps you build the career you want. What is your comfort zone? I'm a project manager. I don't like math. I don't like finance.
Get out of it.
Yeah, but that's why I'm in finance, because I want to pick up some finance skills from volunteering in finance. So I want to learn finance and understand finance. So what am I doing? I'm stretching myself. I'm building up skills and competencies I will need. Thank you, Jermaine. I will finish the sentence.
I'll set my context, Charles, and risk. I heard something from Jim Rohn of blessed memory. He said that think of what you become when you do whatever you do versus what you earn. So it doesn't matter if you earn $0 or if you get the most pay. What you become by doing what you're doing. So I would say it becomes strategic when it aligns with the overarching story that you're telling with your life.
Okay, good. I told people when I came into Canada that give me 10 years at the maximum. I'm going to be the vice president of a top 5 Canadian organization. Right now, I'm the vice president of the Project Management Institute. You just reinforced my dreams. That's what you are before you become. That's strategic. So I'm learning all of the tenets of leadership and how to become vice president, because truth be told, I've done 3 years now. Give it 3, 4, 5 more years. I am going to become a vice president of an organization, become the president. It is my goal.
Right.
So I am using the sandbox of volunteering to test the waters. No one can tell me, Charles, you've not led an organization. How many folks do we have at PMI right now in my team or in our team? I have led organizations from top to bottom. I've built teams from top to bottom using volunteering as a sandbox. So if you're on this call, watch out for Charles. Thomas, volunteering is a strategic tool when it's...
So it aligns with what you just said, Charles, and where we're going to go. And it is pretty much when it turns service into legacy.
When you turn... Oh my goodness, you're dropping nuggets.
Right.
Service into legacy.
Legacy is a mark of strategic service or strategic volunteers. So do note that. Note that when you turn back years from now, it doesn't have to necessarily your name, but George, you brought up a good example, right? Have you what you started and you look back and didn't realize the impact till now, right? It's those pieces that we give back to our community that builds those foundations in the community that we don't need the credit. But you can look back and everybody knows that's a legacy you left behind. And that's been built up.
Thank you, Thomas. Temison, you've already put in the chat, you said volunteering is a strategic tool when it comes to upskilling in a bid to improve the overall quality of life. Pearl, volunteering is a strategic tool when you leverage it as a sandbox to develop yourself. Foster lifelong connections, very important, your tribe, and help you build career resilience. That's true. Volunteering with PMI obviously is not a walk in the park. I know lots of people want to resign like 10, 15 times, but they're there. And guess what? They're building resilience, because what you see in the chapter is what you see in organizations. It is not any different. Even in families, we don't like ourselves. We quarrel all the time, but we don't leave. Right? So, same. 56 elevation. That looks like a pseudonym. I don't mind. It says your passion are starving of attention or an outlet to express or demonstrate them. Your passion is starving of expression. Volunteering is a way to find an outlet. That is deep. Gail, volunteering is a strategic tool when it aligns with your values, goals, and offers a path to grow personally and professionally while giving back. She said something. You're giving before taking. So that's important here of that relationship. You're not taking, you're not looking at taking, you're looking at giving, and hoping to get back. Which Emmanuel says volunteering is a strategic tool when it is genuine. Like Tenisa said, you can't fake it. When they say fake it till you make it, that's the worst advice anybody can give anybody. You are a fraud. Nobody likes fraud. Don't fake it till you make it. There's nothing like that. Face it till you make it. That's face. Call it out for what it is. I do not know how to do XYZ till you make it. Volunteering is a strategic tool when it gives you access to knowledge you cannot gain easily. Amen to that. Taiwo, volunteering is a strategic tool when it aligns with the overarching story you want to tell with your life. That one resonates very, very deeply with me. I can write a whole book on just that part about my life and how it's positioned just based on that conversation or that point from Taiwo. Maybe I would write the book. Yeah, one day, volunteering is a strategic tool when it's done intentionally. You're not by chance, you don't have time. You only have 2 hours a day and you're giving it intentionally. It's not just random, but it's aligned with your goal, building skills, network, and experience. Victorious volunteering aligns you for networking. Amen. Landry, volunteering is strategic when it helps you build relevant skills, expand your network, and demonstrates commitment. Yenga is my newfound darling, my newfound ally. Yenga, volunteering is a strategic tool when it transforms generosity into growth, both to the volunteer and to the community. Ladies and gentlemen, it is 1:59. I promise to get us out of here on the top of the hour. Even though I know you don't want to leave, you got to go do something with your time and stop looking at Charles. I know you enjoy looking at me. I enjoy looking at you as well, but you got to get out of here now. But before we do that, civil play, drop your LinkedIn handle, your LinkedIn address in the chat so we can follow each other. We are a community. We are a family. If you see a job that Taiwo has a mutual contact, ping me to ping Taiwo. But before then, find a way to add value to Taiwo's life. Taiwo, what can I do for you? Can I help you do some research? Can I help you do your posters for your events? Look for ways to give to people before asking them to refer you. We all have needs. All right? Amen. It's time to bounce. Please drop your handle in the chat so we can all copy before we leave the call. I'm not going to end the call. You can leave when you want to, but do not leave before you make sure you've copied all of the LinkedIn handle in the chat and follow them. Be a part of their success story. Be that cheerleader so they can be your cheerleader. Officially, I'm stopping my recording. Thank you.